All right, teammates. We are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the show. Welcome to the number one show on innovative teamwork. Great to have you. Looking forward to having you back for more. To my regular listeners, here we are again. You've come to expect it. This is what we all about. Bringing nothing but the best. We bring in people that have a vision, a goal, and they're here to serve you. Today, we are going to get a new line, like a reframing of the term serial entrepreneur. All right, Mr. Trung Huynh started out as a photographer, goes from photographer to running Smoothie Kings, then he gets up into real estate, and then like me, he becomes a firewalker. It's like, make it move, make it move, make it move, and everything just changes for him. So, with all that, Trung, welcome to the show, man.
Oh man, appreciate you. Thank you for that warm welcome, sir.
Yeah, my pleasure. So let's start it off from jump. How did all of this get started? Because I know it's serial entrepreneurs. There's a certain mindset that they take towards every single thing that every person they meet, everything that they're about. It's about like figuring out how to connect it in some way, shape, form, or fashion to something that's going to be productive or conducive to their business. So what was your like childhood, like your upbringing, and what kind of happened there that put you in this line of thinking?
You know what? I wish it was a glorious story, but I grew up really poor. I was an immigrant to this country, so growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. So when
Was
I
this
think
in
about
San
entrepreneur,
Francisco?
say that again?
In San Francisco?
No, I grew up in Huntington Beach, California.
Oh, in Cali. Oh, you're in Cali. Okay, so
Yeah,
I just
Huntington
saw
Beach,
your post where
California.
you drove from Cali to I believe it's Texas or something crazy like that. But anyway, go
Yes, yes. We just had a road trip. I actually moved my girlfriend, who is from Silicon Valley. We moved her to Austin, Texas, where I'm located now.
ahead. Okay.
But yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So I actually, yeah, we grew up in California and we were just really, really poor. So for me, entrepreneurship was just hustling, right? It's just
Yeah.
trying to make an extra dollar. And so when I was in high school, I played tennis and I didn't have a way to continue to pay for breaking strings in the tennis racket because if you play a lot, you just break strings. And so it starts getting really expensive. And then my coach had pity on me. He gave me one of his old racket restringing machines, and I just started stringing my own rackets. And then I started doing it for other people, and I find that I was making 20, 30 bucks an hour. And I was like, well, this is great. This is way better than going work for somebody else at $6 an hour back in the day.
Mm.
And so that kind of started me thinking about, ways to make money. And when I went off to college, I started a racket restringing business where I put advertisement around the whole university and I just strung for a bunch of people because you had 20,000 people there. So I'm sure there's a handful of tennis players that needed the service. So I loved having my own business in the fact that I could do it anytime. So like it didn't require me to go show up for X amount of hours per day or whatever.
Mhm.
I picked up people's rackets that says, I'll give it back to you in say 48 hours. Most people are like, fine, no worries. I'm not rushing it. And so what I do is I pick up like, 4 or 5 rackets a day. And then when I had a free 20, 30 minutes, it would take me about 20 minutes to string a racket. I could watch TV, I can listen to something, and I can, basically make money. And it was a great way. So, and I was making what, $20 a racket. So I can do 2 rackets an hour. So that's $40 an hour for a college kid.
Yeah.
And for me, that's great money, and I was in college back in 96. So $40 went a lot farther than it does today. Right. So that's how I kind of started in terms of just side hustling,
Mhm.
trying to make ends meet because I had to pay for my own college and I was broke as broke, So like any little bit of money was just like I can eat next week. I could, buy things I need, school books and things like that. So for me, it was about survival. And it just kind of I've always been thinking about like,
Yeah.
how do I make more money, and ways that I can add value to the world, right? Because at the end of the day, like just like Tony says, if you can add more value than somebody else, they're gonna pay you more,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so for me, it was always about like, okay, what can I do that people be willing to pay for more than $7 an hour, right? Because you can go work at McDonald's, nothing wrong with that, but like it's a very low skilled, right?
Mhm.
But for me, it was like, hey, I can teach tennis because I was an elite level tennis player. So I started teaching tennis and I was making 40 or $60 an hour. So I'm like, hey, that's a skill that not many people have. I'm really good at it. Plus, I get to play tennis and get paid for it. So I was like,
Yeah.
win-win, right? So I started teaching tennis on the side as well.
Mhm.
And so that's how I kind of started. But what really hit it off was when I started my photography business. Once I left college,
Hmm.
started my engineering job, and I found a passion for photography. I would have never guessed that I would ever be a photographer because I never had a creative bone in my body, or at least I didn't think I did.
Hmm.
And a friend gave me a like a camera. I started taking pictures and people started really liking them. And sort of, I just slowly got into getting paid to do it. And the next thing you know, I was shooting 20, 30 weddings a year
Hmm.
for like 10 years. And so doing this all the while, I was still holding an engineering job because I actually, unlike a lot of people, I really loved it. I had an amazing job. I got to travel the world doing engineering work and working on some really high technology stuff.
Right.
And I was still shooting 35 weddings a year, making actually more money on the side. I was making like 150,000 a year shooting
Hmm.
weddings, which is
Yeah.
I definitely was not making that in engineering.
You're right.
So that's how I got into my first venture
Hmm.
in photography, which kind of lasted for about 10 years before I decided to close it down.
Right. So there's a couple of things you said there that I want to make sure the listeners get a hold of and that they catch is that, being poor is not an excuse to not go out and get something done, guys. Being poor is actually in many ways, it opens your mind, opens your heart, opens so many things to so many possibilities that folks who do have money cannot see. So that point about your coach kind of gave you a lifeline in terms of, hey, the tennis rackets, it kept breaking. I'm going to give you this, and you used it as best as you could. That's when a coach starts appreciating the things you do. That's when a coach is like, you know what? That's why I get into the business, because somebody who didn't have the resources took 100% full advantage of something I gave them. And that's when it comes. I coach now as well. I'm in the fitness and education world as well. That's what makes us passionate about wanting to give back to people when they don't walk around with excuses. And I want to make sure also that we mention the fact that, look, you're doing this, you're making money, but you're also actually pursuing a degree. So it wasn't like either or. It wasn't like, because one of the things that intrigued me about your bio is that you talk about how you help small businesses be able to turn like side hustles into creating like a regular revenue stream. So even though you're making money with the rackets, it's not like you're like, look, I'm not gonna go to class, I'm good, I'm just gonna quit. You were still pursuing the engineering degree, got a great job in it, and you gave yourself option. You gave yourself options. So, with all that being said, now I can sort of see where you have engineering degree, you have some entrepreneurial experience, and then you get into possibly flipping houses and real estate. But what really threw me, and I want you to kind of speak on this, is Smoothie King. Like, how did the smoothie thing, how did it, like, did you own the Smoothie King, or did you just go start making, like, what attracted you to actually own a Smoothie King?
It as random as it sounds, and it's kind of funny. It is kind of random in a way
Yeah,
because I joke in saying that a lot of the big events in my life kind of happened serendipitously.
yeah,
How I actually got into it at all was I actually was sitting next to a guy on an airplane as we were flying to Mexico City, or actually Guanajuato, Mexico, for a wedding, and it turns out he was attending the same wedding I was going to. Didn't know him,
there you
so
go.
we just
Oh,
started
so
talking
you were
about what
shooting, yeah,
you.
you were shooting it, right, right, right,
I
right.
was actually a guest. I was a
Oh, you're
guest this
just a
time.
guest. You weren't even shooting.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I was not shooting. I was just, chatting. I talked to everybody.
Okay.
So some people joke, it's like, you never met a stranger, have you, Trung? I'm like, nope. I'm very curious. I talked to
Yeah.
everybody, and he said, yeah, I'm a professor at University of Houston, and I actually am about to start my first Smoothie King store. I'm like, that is so fascinating. I go to Smoothie King like 3 times a week.
Yeah.
Awesome,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So
Okay. So you're a regular consumer, customer.
yeah, I was a consumer. I love the product. And so I was like, this is someone I need to stay in touch with. And every quarter we'd go meet for lunch, just kind of check in how he's doing. And it wasn't with any agenda. It was somebody interesting I wanted to kind of keep in touch with, basically. And, I started telling him, I was like, I'm really thinking about potentially opening my own store. And so we talked some more. And then a couple months after that, he's like, hey, my mom and I both own my first store. Would you be interested in buying her out and being
Hmm.
50-50 partners in the business? I was like, I looked up the numbers. I was like, let's do it.
Hmm.
And, I got a loan, put in some of my own cash, got a loan, and then bought 50% into the business. And what was really great about this was that when you start a business from scratch, the problem is you start in the red for many, many months. And a lot of times people never get out of the red. That's why they go bankrupt, right? Because they're just bleeding cash.
Mm-hmm.
And the beautiful thing about me joining a company that already a year into it is they've already gone through that period.
Mm-hmm.
I have basically a mentor slash business partner that knows how to run it really well,
Mm-hmm.
that I can just step in. I was still working a full-time job at this time, but because I didn't really need to, go work at it, Smoothie King, because we were owners and
Mm-hmm.
we had a manager running the store every day. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was able to go on weekends, spend several hours there working the shifts, understanding the business, doing the numbers on the business, working the books and everything, starting to understand the behind the scenes part of the business, which is really the business, right? Because the making the smoothies is a very small part of running a business. That
Yeah.
is the actual execution and delivery of the product, but there's so much goes on behind it, like
I remember
building a team.
actually
Mhm.
watching an Undercover Boss episode of Smoothie King, and man, you know, I've watched that show very frequently, but the portions and the way people put the food, like so much of it is about serving size, and if you drop one that costs you a couple $100, so someone like you that had to actually study the numbers, a manager, let's say it's just somebody that's working there, not really taking the job seriously, if they're taking smoothies, if they're doing, like, you are going to notice every little inch of it.
Mhm.
And that's so key for business ownership. That's so incredibly important. So,
Yeah. So let me backtrack a little bit and tell you why I picked the Smoothie King. Okay, because it wasn't as random as it sounds. Because if you've read, so you know how sometimes there's a moment in your life where you have an epiphany moment, and then once you see something, you can't unsee it,
mm-hmm.
right? And then you're like, okay, I cannot continue on this path knowing what I know. Okay.
Yes.
And I had that epiphany moment like in 2009. I was reading the book Rich Dad Poor Dad's The Cash Flow Quadrant. And if
Oh,
you're a
and
business owner, you should probably read this book, right?
that's what I got to pause you because listen, listeners, I get it. I've been doing this show for about 5 years now, and virtually, probably feels like virtually every episode this book gets brought up. I'm just glad somebody else brought it up first because we talk, like, my regular listeners, we talk about Rich Dad Poor Dad as if it's like a Bible. I am absolutely incredibly obsessed with that book and Robert Kiyosaki and what he's all about. So thank you for being the
Yeah.
first one to bring it up this time.
You know what? I tell people when they start entrepreneurship, this is the Bible. Read this first. It'll shift your mindset. This is what
Yes,
you need to do.
yes.
Right. So the subsequent book is called the Cash Flow Quadrant.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And like without going through the whole book, the basic premise of the book is this: they say there's four ways people make money. There's the E quadrant, which is employee quadrant, which is you trading time for money. The
Mm-hmm.
S quadrant is you're self-employed and you're trading time for money, but at a higher rate with more flexibility, right? You're a doctor, a lawyer, a coach like me, you,
Right, right.
a photographer, which is what I was, right? Because when I wasn't shooting, I wasn't making money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I
Exactly.
have my own business per se,
Self-employed,
but
right.
I'm still trading time for money. Then there's the I quadrant, which is the investor, where you're trading your money to make money. Like I buy real estate, I buy stocks, it appreciates over time. And then there's a B quadrant where I'm trading other people's time for my money.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that epiphany where I realized I was the S and I can only make so much money shooting weddings. It
Mm-hmm.
was great money. Don't get me wrong. I could have been very comfortable making 150K a year and quit my job and be completely okay and
Right.
be more than comfortable. But if I wanted to ever hit, say, 500,000, a million dollars a year,
Mm-hmm.
there's no way I can do that in the business that I was running because I was limited by me, right? And that's the
Right.
problem. And
Right.
so after that epiphany moment, I said, I'm not booking another wedding. I'm closing this business down.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the next 2 years, I was in a search for a business that was a business where I can buy the business
Mm-hmm.
and not be trading time for money, but I'm trading other people's time for my money. And
Right.
that's why I was looking for Smoothie King. The reason I picked Smoothie King, say, over other franchise businesses is it's I love the product, and I believe that you have to really believe and have conviction about the product that you
Right.
have a business in. Otherwise, it's like if you can't really believe in the product and be proud of what you sell, it's hard to sell it, right? And
Yeah.
it's hard to own the business and care about the business. So like for me, I would never say go buy a KFC because I'm not a customer. Like I
Right.
just would never do that. Or
Mm-hmm.
say Subway, right? But to me, Smoothie King was the product that I enjoyed. B, it was a simple product where everybody in the team, there's like say every store has about 12 members. Any one of those people, say mine as a manager, can do every single one of those jobs. And
Hmm.
so, like, if Jimmy is sick, Jenny can come in and work, and she can do everything he could do, and that was it. And within like 2 or 3 hours, I can get somebody to start making smoothies.
Yeah.
Whether they know how to work a cash register just yet, it doesn't matter. Like within a day, they're fully up and running,
It's
right? And obviously, we'll need to be able to train them up on like upsells and things like that. But for the most part, they're not cooking anything, so there's no burners. There's nothing to burn down. It's
yeah.
just blenders, ice machines,
Hmm.
frozen fruit, fresh fruit, and fridges.
Yeah.
Super simple business.
Right.
And so like it kind of checked all the boxes for me because I didn't want to open a restaurant where you had to have chefs and
Yeah.
fix the menu and create menus and wastage of, foods.
Right.
Smoothie King streamlined all of that. And
Right. And,
so,
and not to cut you, but I want to make sure I pause and make sure I make this point again for listeners.
sure.
You are considering buying a franchise. These are the things and the questions that you need to be asking yourself. Am I paying to own a business, or did I just pay to have another job? All right. If
Hmm.
you make that clear in your mind, then you're going to make the right decision. I previously, before I got into education, I was previously a trainer at a company named Nine Round, and that company is no longer the specific Nine Round that I was at is no longer in business because this owner made the decision that he was basically paid to have another job as opposed to letting us kind of do what we did, and he's going to go out and market and do what it is he's doing. He was just sitting literally at the gym by himself all day. And I learned the importance of, if you're going to spend a $500,000 or whatever they're going to charge, it's not going to be a cheap franchise if I'm sure. If you're going to pay that money and figure it out, ask yourself, is this going to be another job for me? Am I going to be able to be hands off, bring people in, and then I'm rolling doing what it is I would love to do, enjoy time with family, or, build other things and stuff like that. So that's a very important distinction that he made. So I want to make sure we made that clear as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that. That's super important because at the end of the day, like I'm not looking to buy a $40,000 manager job at a Smoothie King, right? I mean, like you can do that any day. Like there's no point in buying a store and then getting a shitty job. Like,
Exactly.
so that's 100% true, and I believe that. But at the end of the day, though, we have a lot of owners that run the whole spectrum. Some of them are super hands-on where they're there for 30 hours a week. And
Hmm.
then there's some people that own like 10 or 15 that never see their stores.
Hmm.
So it also at the end of the day, like how do you want to run the business? How do you want to run your life? And to your point, if you're looking to buy a business that gives you that flexibility, time freedom, things like that, then you have to build your team, right? Building the right team to empower them to be able to run the store, the day-to-day operations
Hmm.
without your constant input. That's
Yeah,
the whole point, right? Because if you're having to micromanage, then you're just having a pretty crappy job,
exactly.
right? Okay, so yeah.
Okay, so you're running the Smoothie King. Now, I actually have a colleague of mine. She just bought a food truck. The name of it, Chopped and Cheesy. And she told me that she started it just so she can sell it in a few years. So when you decide to buy the Smoothie King, was there a plan to eventually get out and then get into real estate, or did this just kind of happen by chance? What was your experience like there that made you say, okay, I'm going to jump into flipping homes and do those kinds of things?
Well, so it's actually kind of funny how it all transitioned because by the time I got my Smoothie Kings, I already had 5 rental properties. So I was
Oh, you
already
were
a real
doing
estate investor.
simultaneously. Okay, right.
Oh yeah, because I do this actually all while actually holding jobs.
Oh,
So
and all right.
during,
Well, all right.
yeah.
Let's literally put this into context. You're still working your engineering job. You
Hmm.
have the Smoothie King, and then you're also doing rental property. Now you know that there's only 24 hours in a day. So now we got to make sure we kind of talk about how were you able to manage the time to get some of these things done. Like, what was the day to day
Right.
for you like at that point?
Yeah, so here's the beautiful thing,
Yeah.
right? Um, if you set up your rental properties right,
Hmm.
there's very, very little input from you. People
Right.
think it's like oh my God, I don't want to get calls at 3 in the morning for toilets. I'm like, first of
Yeah.
all, nobody's pooping at 3 in the morning. So, and B, there's nothing you can do at 3 in the morning anyways,
All right.
right? So
Okay.
I don't know what people are talking about because that's like the one horror story I hear over and over again. And that's like one objection with it. I'm like, yeah, but if it wasn't for that, would you want to own real estate? They're like, yeah, sure. I was like, well, that doesn't happen to me. I've owned 5 rental houses for 7 years. I've never
Uh-huh.
had that call. And so the second thing is if you get good tenants, and to me, it's kind of like how good you are at screening, just like how good you are at screening, say, people you date,
Got it. Got it.
right?
Got it.
It's like if you screen well, then you don't have troublesome tenants, right?
Mhm.
One of the tricks I came up with was obviously making sure you run your background check and you call your previous owners and things like that. But I required, as part of the rental agreement, they give me 12 months worth of rental checks ahead of time, post dated per, beginning of each month.
Mhm.
And I don't cash it obviously until the beginning of the month.
Mhm.
But the people that are objective, I don't have them as renters. And the reason I do that is
Yeah.
because I was like, you know what? If you are an upstanding person that handles their finances, got their crap together, then
Mhm.
you have no questions that you can hand over 12 checks and that that thing will clear at the end of the month.
That's I hope y'all jotted that down. I mean, thank you actually for sharing that, because that's almost seems like it should be a proprietary thing that you keep to. That is excellent, and I almost want to like make sure listeners, and including myself, are able to take that principle and apply it into how you hire people, apply it into who you bring into your, like Tony Robbins talks about, the peer group and the people that you actually associate yourself with. Make sure that you're willing to do that, because if they object, okay, that's a clear sign. 1,000 blaring lights. That ain't somebody that I want renting. I'm going to move on to somebody else that is actually going to be able to at least do that, because like you said, you're not cashing them. I'm just doing this so you can actually stay focused and make sure your rent is paid on time.
Yeah, so they don't have to mail me checks.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to worry about, hey, did you put your check in the mail? Oh, I forgot. Let
Yeah,
me
and
let me
that's just
send it
more
3 days late, right? We eliminated all that. I was like, hey, I do this for you.
okay.
I was like, I just want you to eliminate any hassle. I
Mm-hmm.
won't cash it, obviously, because it's post dated. I can't cash it early anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And this just ensures that we all get paid. And if you are handling your finances and the money should be in the bank by the first of the month anyways,
Mm-hmm.
nobody has a problem. Everybody's great. And then I also say, hey, here's a number of my plumber. Here's the number of my electrician. If you have any issues with it, give me a call, but call them and schedule a time. And then my plumber electrician will call me and say, hey, they're doing this. Would you be okay? I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. Go ahead and take care of it.
Right. So you
I
got
don't
ahead of the
fix
price. You set
HVAC.
it up. Right.
Yeah, I set up the system. I set
Right.
up the system so that I am not bothered by it. And I have 5 rental houses at that time, and I got called maybe once a month, ever.
Man, and that
Total. Total. Not
that
one
yeah,
per
I
house, but
mean,
one total.
yes, that's saving a whole lot of people, because you're right. I actually do have a couple of colleagues that have had rental houses. They've had one and they've said, you know what, I'm done with it, because they got so tired of the hassle. And it's because they didn't have a system set up like that, to where you're dealing with every little thing that goes wrong with the house, with the tenants. And then you have to have that peace of mind is just not there, to where you just say, look, I don't need to put my money into it. But when you have a system set up, it is very, very important actually too, in any business, to know what the potential problems of the business can be, and then get ahead of those problems, get ahead of those issues. It doesn't have to be real estate. It doesn't have to be anything it is you want to do, but do so much research on your industry that you can get ahead of your issue and then figure out ways to solve it. That's what people will pay you for. That's what leads to a life that's fulfilling, and you're able to, again, become more flexible. So, with that,
Mhm.
when did the transition to where now you're coaching other business owners? When did all of that start to come about?
Well, so at the end of 2016,
Mhm.
I ended up walking away from engineering, and I was like, you know what? I want to do real estate full time. So I started wholesaling, fixing and flipping, and doing sub two properties, wraps, a little bit more sophisticated instruments of buying and retaining real estate and then selling it. But also, I started teaching and coaching other real estate investors on actually how to grow their investing business, because
Mhm.
I joined a coaching program, paid a lot of money to it. I was such a success in their program, they asked me to be one of their coaches. They're
Okay.
like, you're awesome. People love you. Can you teach?
So was
And
this
so
around the time you went to a UPW?
um, I'm getting to that. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I did. So from like 2015 to 2018, I did that.
Mhm.
And I got so burnt out in real estate because we were
Okay.
doing too
Right.
many deals.
Right.
I mean, it's a good problem to have, but kind of bad because it ended up being so stressful. We were doing 6 or 8 deals a month between me and this other partner and like our admin that he had a stroke, and
Uh,
we were like, okay, we can't do this. Like this is a no go. This is not a business making this amount of money worth dying over. Like none of it is. Like there's no point. And
right.
so I ended up walking away from the business, and I was like, I can't do this. This is not aligned with what I want anymore.
Mhm.
What we built 3 years ago, what we started, we thought we wanted, to what we ended up having. And
Mhm.
a lot of times, this is something that I think a lot of new entrepreneurs don't understand, is that you start a business with a certain intention, and you put your nose down and you grinding for, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and you have things along the way that kind of steer the ship slightly differently, right? Because you have to you adjust to the market, and you change because you realize certain things are not what you thought. So you shift and shift and shift. The next thing you know, when you started out this direction, next thing you know, you're 80 or 100 degrees
Exactly.
the wrong direction.
Right.
And then you wake up like 3 years later, you're like, crap, this is not what we wanted at all. This is not what we wanted. We didn't want to build a business where we were working 80 hours a week.
Right.
We were making like 60 grand a month profit,
Mhm.
but it's not worth it if you're dad.
Exactly. You
And
can't
that's
do
what we
that.
realized. And so
Right.
I walked away. And
Mhm.
then 2 months later, I was kind of first time in my life, very kind of lost.
Mhm.
I was, my identity for that last 3 years was being a real estate investor. I posted social content. I gave workshops. I taught. I was sleeping, and breathing real estate. And then next thing you know, I walked away from that whole thing. I'm like, I'm done.
Right.
And it was just so stressful that it left me a bad taste in my mouth. And so
But what
I
was that?
went to Tony
So
Robbins.
that
Yeah.
before you get there though, but what was that moment like for you? Did you have family members trying to talk you out of it? Was there anybody there in your ear just kind of telling you, little stick with it, knowing stuff? Was this like a solo decision that you made to say, I'm not doing this anymore because it's not in alignment with what it is I thought it was going to be 3 years ago?
It was purely my decision. I was single at that time, and I was just having so many, just arguments every day. When you're stressed, you're
Right.
arguing with your partner, right? And it's just,
Yeah.
hey, not that enjoyable, right? Because if you're there, you're like, okay, this should be fun. This should be something that we're excited about. It's
Hmm.
not anymore. So what's the point? This is, and you look at, your values of what we wanted to do at the beginning of the business was help people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And help people out of foreclosure and things like that. It ended up being about the money, only about the money.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you know what? Like, this isn't what I signed up for. I'm not aligned with it. I handed the keys over to the business. Like, man, if you want this, you're welcome to continue on the business. I'm done.
Hmm.
He actually tried to talk me out of it multiple days. And I
Yeah.
was like, no, I've made my decision. I mean, you're welcome to continue, but I can't do this. I can't see you destroy your life, and possibly because he got a stroke and then came
Yeah,
back
that's
to it
what's
4 months later,
right.
and like was working harder than he was before. And I'm like, dude, do you want to die? It's
Yeah,
like,
that's what. Yeah, you gotta. I mean, listen, in business, the reason I ask that is because this kind of stuff is important. All right. Entrepreneurship, making money, all that stuff is great. But eventually the human element does come in as a role. And you have got to get yourself around other human beings so they can actually see what's happening to you. Because, like you just said, when you get into your entrepreneurial vision in your place, your head's down, your blinders are up, and you're just going, 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 going. And you're gonna look up and realize, man, this is not at all what I thought it was going to be. And that's in those moments you got to have the balls to make the decision to walk away if it need be. You have to do that. And again, the people in your corner are going to be really, really important in regards to that. But ultimately, the decision is going to be on you to make that decision, make that the ultimate decision. So, with all that,
yeah.
I kind of know where you're probably going with this because you mentioned that guy that make a move. You mentioned that guy. You mentioned him, so I'll kind of give you the platform to go ahead and speak on that experience.
So I was looking for direction, and I decided to go to UPW, my first one,
Mm-hmm.
did the whole fire walked, and totally changed my life. And I walked away from it realizing that I want to do something that helps people, be more about something that bigger than myself, be something more fulfilling, and coaching other people. And because I've had so many years of entrepreneurship, I've done so many different businesses, I've
Mm-hmm.
helped so many others. When I was every type of business I've done, I've actually coached other people along the way in that same business. So I've just seen so much business as well. So I just realized that, you know what, for me, they say growth and contribution were starting two big areas in my life. And for me, teaching and empowering other people and teaching people the skill set of entrepreneurship, because like entrepreneurship is not a skill we teach or learn in school or anywhere really.
No.
And so we're all taught to be employees, right? But I know from in my heart that entrepreneurship has been the vehicle that has been the catalyst for the change and opportunities and the personal growth in my life. And I
Mhm.
want to give those skills to people that aspire to change their family, change their destiny, change their legacy of their generations after them, to be able to own something and not just work for somebody else forever.
Right.
And I want to teach that to other people. So when I'm looking at people that are struggling, I said, I can totally help you. I can, and then 10 minutes of looking at your business, I can probably tell you what you need to change and make a big change immediately. And then if you continue to want to see more help, then we can discuss whatever. But for me, it's about being able to empower these people to, you know, uh, build a business
Okay.
and build that freedom that they've always wanted and get that freedom and achieve freedom.
So one of the things that I actually remember, I believe it was day three after we did everything with Tony, and I'm not sure how it was with you, but he didn't show up for day four. But day three was like the big transformation day. And one of the things that I remember him mentioning was when you leave the actual UPW, this is how it's gonna be. You're gonna be walking around like fire. You're gonna have the sugar rush. You're gonna be talking to people, and they're gonna just look at you like, okay, whatever. This and that could be discouraging because of what you just went through over the past 4 days. And you did like so. Walk us through the moments after, right after you left UPW. Did it immediately say, "Look, I'm gonna start calling clients. I'm gonna turn this into all coaching business"? How did it? How did everything sort of work out once you decided to leave those 4 days?
Um, I wish there was a glory story that followed that, but actually it took me a couple years before I stepped into the coaching arena, honestly.
Really?
It was probably about 2 years. Well, mainly, I guess a year and a half. Um, I ended up being able to just do kind of odd ends kind of businesses, for a little while. I started getting into real estate. Not real estate, I'm sorry. I was still working my Smoothie King, so I focused on that for a couple years. I ended up liquidating my rental properties
Mhm.
and then buying my partner out of the businesses. So like I ended up being 100% owner of the business. And
Okay.
um, so I ended up just actually spending um, a year and taking the year off completely.
Hmm.
And the reason I even mention that is because many years before, my younger sisters, who are like 13 and 15 years younger than me, they're not really like into entrepreneurship. They're very artsy and things like that. And I spoke to them, and me and my older sister, we're both entrepreneurs, and so we're kind of always, how they're always talking about money, right? You're talking about
Yeah, yeah.
businesses, opportunities, and things
Right.
like that.
Everywhere at the dinner table, everywhere you are, you're just talking business.
And
You're
you just
talking
talk
about
because you love it, because you're
it's what
passionate
you do,
about it,
right?
right? And my sisters were like, why do you always talk about money? And I was like, well, it's not, money doesn't buy you happiness, it buys you choices.
Hmm.
And when I was able to take a year off between the time I did UPW and the time I started coaching, I told them, I was like, you see, this is what I've been working for the last 15 years,
Hmm.
is this I have the ability to take a year off.
Hmm.
And it's not because I have to work, but I get to not work. And I make that choice. And I travel the world, I saw friends,
Hmm.
and did what I wanted. And my Smoothie King was making me money while I was doing whatever.
Yeah.
And I say that, and not to brag, but to say, hey, that's the ultimate, right? Because if you buy yourself the freedom to go do what you want when you want, to me, I think that is the currency that people are striving for these days, and not a big bank account. Because
Mhm.
if you're strapped to a desk and you're making a lot of money, but you don't get to do anything that you truly want,
Yeah.
to me, that's not as valuable as the flexibility, time freedom, to travel,
Hmm.
go go to UPWs, go to Date with Destinies,
Hmm.
go crew those events, which is what I do as well,
Oh, you
and
still
go.
crew? Okay. It was actually one of the crew members that hooked me up with the deal to get in there. So
Yep, yep. So I accrue UPW every year, and I've done like so many of the programs. I've done Business Mastery. I've done Date with Date with Destiny 4 times. I've done like leadership academy. So like if I was working a job all the time and wanted to go 4 or 5 1 week courses all throughout the year, I
Mhm.
wouldn't be able to do that, you know? So that is what you start building your life for that freedom that you eventually get.
Yes.
First couple years, it's gonna be tough. Not
Yeah.
always, but that's the goal.
So there's a common misconception, especially because I've been in those situations too, where I'm just talking business and talking about money and stuff like that. There's a common misconception with that. Just because people are talking about money does not mean they're making decisions for the money. All right, they're making decisions. They're talking about money, but they're doing it in a way so they can become free at some point. So it's not that they're making decisions just for money, money, money. Even though it may sound like it because they're talking about it, we're talking about it. So at some point you don't have to worry about money, and then ultimately you end up being free. And that's really the essence of entrepreneurship. It's, yes, going to talk about what makes that sense financially. We're going to get away from just putting out something fancy, some logo and all that. We're going to get away from that. Just give me the numbers, what's going to work, what's not going to work, so eventually you don't have to think about the money. That is what we got to take away when you start to hear people. Don't kind of ridicule them, or especially if you're in a situation where you may be working a job and you hear somebody like an entrepreneur who's always on it, always on it. You shouldn't ridicule the person, make the person feel like they're less than because they're always talking business or they're always talking about money. You should just understand this is something that they're passionate about, and they're doing it so the money won't be an issue in a couple years down the line. And that's what I love about entrepreneurship. And I love that element to it, to where one day my niece and nephew, if they want anything from their uncle financially, he's going to have it, because spent pretty much at this point, they're teenagers, pretty much their entire lives just trying to make business work, trying to create this, trying to do whatever it is you have to do. You have to have a big heart, and you have to really care about the people. It's like you had mentioned,
Mhm.
younger sisters. Hey, one day they need anything from their older brother, they got it because I worked my ass off to just not even just give you a check per se, but give you a mindset, give you some resources, give you some people that you can look up to say, there's another way to just live your life in a very passionate way. So that I think is a key element to it as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, I eat, sleep, and breathe entrepreneurship. You know, for me, it's a lifestyle,
Yes.
and it's a way of thinking. And to me, and I think Tony talks about this, is money is a tool, right? I mean, it's a currency to be able to allow you to do the things that you really want to do.
Right.
It's not about never worrying about money, because here's the thing, and I've talked to millionaires and some billionaires, and you know what? They worry about money, but differently. Because
Yeah.
you're always going to worry about money. Like I hate to say it, but it's not about whether I could have to pay my rent, right? That's a different kind of worry, where they're like, okay, you know, when you have, though you don't have enough, you're like, okay, how do I make more? When
Mhm.
you have it, you're like, how do I hold on to it? And then the next step is like, how do you grow it? Right? Because if it's just sitting there, you're losing money. So you're always thinking about it in some different way. It's just a different level of thinking, like new level, new devil, as they say, right?
Right.
So it's not like you never worry about it. It's just you worry about different aspects of it.
Hmm.
And so to me, I think it's just a tool, like Tony says. If you're an idiot or you're mean, you just have more money to be mean with, right? If you're nice and you're
Right.
nice and you care and you want to impact the world, you're going to use that money for good.
Hmm.
You know, so to me, it's tool is not a stigma, which is what we've been taught, where money is evil and da 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 and all these things,
Right.
which unfortunately give a lot of people a bad relationship with money.
Yeah,
And
poor money mindsets. Yeah, I
yeah, poor
love
money
the
mindsets.
story he does where there was I guess there was a homeless guy asking for some money, and he takes out like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and then he just gives him $1, and then he uses the example: if you just want money, good, here's a quarter, here's $1. But if you start asking specifically how much you want, then you start to make a change, and you start getting direct in terms of what it is you want to do and how you want to live. That was I always, that like so many parts of that event stick out, but that was one that really stuck out. Oh man, I was like, man, don't just ask for money, ask for a specific amount and get a specific
Be
dollar.
specific about what you want. Absolutely, man. Because you're
So,
just like, hey, I just want to lose weight. You're like, you lost a pound. You're
yeah,
good.
you got lots of out. That's like, great. There's a girl, there's a guy. Go ahead, just pick one, right? So, with all that, I do want to be very respectful of your time. Can you just tell people what's next, how they can get in touch with you? Where do you kind of see your business going in the next 2, 3 years and stuff like that?
Yeah, actually, you know what? I'm actually working with a lot of entrepreneurs, and my goal is actually step back into the real estate arena and actually continue to help more real estate investors build their real estate wholesaling and fix and flip business.
Mhm.
I've realized that I've taken enough of a break from it, and I realized that there's so many skills and things that are still in my brain, and my skills of raising money, networking with people, and bringing people in together, make deals,
Mhm.
is something that I can definitely teach new people how to do that, because it's not just purely the strategy of like, hey, how do you execute on a wholesale deal? But
Mhm.
like there's other soft skills and building the business side of the thing, of building the CRM systems and all these different things that are very, very important. So I work with entrepreneurs, absolutely, but I also really am more focused now on real estate investors that are looking to build their business.
Now,
So
it's
you can go ahead.
primarily residential and commercial.
Primary residential, yeah,
Okay,
mostly
okay.
residential, yeah. And so you can find me at trunghwin.co. So hopefully that'll be on the show notes.
Yeah.
And you can find me on Facebook or Instagram at Trung, that's TRUNG, the letter Q and HUYNH. Apparently there's a Trung Huyns already, so I had to add the Q to it. So there's,
I did see that. I saw that.
yeah,
I'm like, wait, that's not the guy out there. I did see that. So you're not the
yeah,
only
yeah. So there's a lot of people there
one.
apparently in Trung Huyns. I didn't realize I was that popular of a name, but okay.
All right, cool.
But yeah, so
All
you
right,
can find me on socials. Yep.
cool. So the way I close out all the shows, Trunk, is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. You are young, growing up Huntington Beach, poor, not knowing where your next meal is from. You are just struggling, wanting to play tennis, all that kind of stuff. Pretend that that young version of Trunk has come to the Zoom room. Give him some words of encouragement, and we'll officially close.
Don't worry about what other people say.
Mhm.
They don't think about you nearly as much as you think. Go after your dreams and fail fast, fail often. The things that people hold people back are the things that never actually exist or actually ever happen. It's all the fear and the things that come up in your mind.
Mhm.
So just go after it, because only you will know at the end of the day whether you put in your all, because no one else is there to hold you accountable except your older self looking back, and whether you've done everything you could with the gifts that were given to you. So just go after it.
That's it, man. Short. I officially have nothing else to say. The mic is officially dropping. Again, appreciate you coming on, man. You brought it. I'm sure you're gonna be helping out a lot of people and all that good stuff. So, with all that, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.